Sometimes an actor becomes so intrinsically associated with a movie character that it's very difficult to imagine anyone else occupying that screen space. In the case of these castings, the actors were so right for their roles that it seems completely wrong that they weren't the first ones the filmmakers had in mind. Here are some actors who almost didn't get their very memorable parts. Gene Wilder. While he's best remembered for his iconic performance as Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder also collaborated with director Mel Brooks on a series of classic comedies, such as The Producers, Young Frankenstein, and most famously, Blazing Saddles. This 1974 satire was a savage takedown of both the Western genre and race relations in America, and it featured Wilder as the Waco Kid, a drunken gunfighter who decides to help Sheriff Bart face down racist townfolk and an evil gang of cowboys, bikers, and Nazi soldiers. But while Wilder now seems like such an obvious guy to play the part, Brooks originally wanted an older actor. Someone who could look like an over-the-hill alcoholic. He considered going after Dan Dailey, an actor best known for starring in old-timey musicals, and thought about casting talk show host Johnny Carson. Brooks even asked John Wayne to read the script. And while the Duke thought it was hysterical, he said he couldn't play in a movie that had such low-down dirty talk, even though he did promise to be the first one in line to see it.
I won't. The hell I will.
Eventually, Brooks hired Gig Young, but he had to drop out, ironically because of his problems with alcohol. Desperate, Brooks finally decided to cast Wilder, who'd been asking to play the part for a while. And the rest is cinematic history. Ed Harris. In 1998, Jim Carrey gave one of his best performances to date in The Truman Show. But he wasn't the only one bringing his A-game to Peter Weir's brilliant take on TV, celebrity, and religion. Ed Harris also created a memorable role in Christoph, the all-powerful director who sits in his moon base and controls every detail of Truman's life. But while Harris was perfect in the role, he actually didn't get the part until 2 months after shooting started, and that's because Christoph was actually meant to be played by a different Hollywood legend. Best known for his performances in movies like Easy Rider, Apocalypse Now, Blue Velvet, and Hoosiers, Dennis Hopper was the man originally cast as Christoph, but he didn't last very long. Speaking with writer Alex Godfrey, Hopper said he was on the set for like 2 days and got fired. Scott Rudin, the producer, had made an agreement with the director, Peter Weir, that if he didn't like what I did after the first day's dailies, then he would fire me. And they fired me. Although it was an insult to Hopper, it also put Ed Harris in a tough spot, as he started shooting just days after signing onto the project. Harris later revealed, "I didn't have much time to prepare, but it worked out alright. In fact, it was almost a blessing in disguise, because I was forced to trust my instincts."
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Clint Eastwood. Directed by Sergio Leone, A Fistful of Dollars is the movie that kick-started Clint Eastwood's career as a whispering, no-nonsense, squinty-eyed action hero that we've all come to know. But back in the early 60s, Eastwood was just a lowly TV actor, and nowhere close to the top of the list when it came to casting choices. In fact, Leone offered the role of the man with no name to pretty much every actor in Hollywood before giving the job to Eastwood. He went after guys you've probably never heard of, like Rory Calhoun, Henry Silva, and Eric Fleming. He also tried to lure in bigger names like Henry Fonda, Charles Bronson, and James Coburn, but they all shot down his proposal, mainly over money. Leone could only pay $15,000, which wasn't much for an established star. Fortunately, the Italian director saw an episode of the TV show Rawhide, which featured a young Eastwood as Rowdy Yates, a naive, immature cowboy who's a whole lot friendlier than the man with no name. Despite the differences, Leone thought Eastwood was, quote, good at getting on a horse. Soon enough, Eastwood was one of the biggest movie stars in history, all thanks to a corny TV show and a bunch of overpaid actors. Casey Affleck. In the critically acclaimed film Manchester by the Sea, Casey Affleck plays Lee Chandler, a man struggling with grief and guilt in the aftermath of a terrible tragedy, and he totally owns the part. In fact, he won an Academy Award for his work with the role in 2017, but it was actually longtime Affleck family friend Matt Damon who was initially supposed to star in the role. The film's plot was originally dreamed up by Damon and John Krasinski of The Office, and they asked filmmaker Kenneth Lonergan to write the script. Damon intended to direct and star, but it took Lonergan 3 years to write the first draft. When he was done, Damon didn't have the time to direct. He still wanted to play the main character, but when other projects got in the way, he passed the role of Lee to Affleck.
Yeah, he passes on all the good ones.
Damon told The Hollywood Reporter, "This is one of the best roles I've ever seen for a leading actor. I didn't want to hand it off to somebody unless that was somebody I grew up with and who would make me happy I gave it up. All that work and all he got was one lousy shout-out."
Thank you also to Matt Damon for creating this opportunity.
Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart. Sandwiched in between Fight Club and Zodiac, Panic Room is a film that's often forgotten when discussing David Fincher films. And really, that's too bad, as the 2002 film is a solid thriller featuring strong performances from its two female leads, Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart. The two play a mom and daughter taking shelter inside, well, a panic room after a trio of thieves break into their home. But while both actresses do a great job, neither were the original picks for this gritty suspense film. Fincher has revealed that the first actress chosen for the part of the daughter, Sarah, was, quote, very feminine and girlish and all those things, and just irritated him beyond belief. Fincher hasn't mentioned the actress by name, but Hayden Panettiere was reportedly booked to play Sarah, but dropped out shortly before filming started. Fincher then went with Stewart after seeing both an audition tape and a commercial featuring the young girl, saying he liked her tomboyish androgynous quality. As for the role of Meg, the mom, the part originally went to Nicole Kidman, and she was actually working on the movie for about 2 weeks before injuring her knee. Evidently, the pain was so bad that she was forced to pull out of Panic Room. Fortunately for Fincher, Jodie Foster saved the day, taking the lead role and getting production moving again. Interestingly, casting Foster changed the director's entire vision for the film. Talking to The Guardian, Fincher explains that Kidman was all about glamour and physicality, like Grace Kelly in a Hitchcock film, while with Foster, it's more about what happens in her eyes, it's more political. Vin Diesel. The Fast and the Furious franchise is full of memorable characters, but Dominic Toretto is the centerpiece of the series. This street racing criminal who puts family above all else has appeared in every entry in the series except one, and he's basically the chassis of the whole Fast and Furious universe. Nowadays, it's virtually impossible to think of anyone else besides Vin Diesel playing the part of Dom because he is the face of the franchise. But as you've probably guessed by now, Diesel wasn't number one on the list of actors to try out for Toretto. Producer Neil H. Moritz has since revealed that while actor Paul Walker was Brian from the get-go, studio executives were keen to cast Timothy Olyphant as Dom. However, for unknown reasons, he passed on the part. Seeing Olyphant as Dom would have been interesting, but picking Diesel was obviously the right choice. The first Fast and Furious earned $207 million on a $38 million budget, and the series has become one of the top 10 highest-grossing franchises of all time, largely thanks to Diesel's star power.
The street always wins.
So yeah, it looks like the studio executives at Universal eventually chose the right man for the job. Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling. Sure, La La Land didn't actually win the Oscar for Best Picture, but it did win the hearts of audiences around the world, largely thanks to the winning duo of Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling. But if things had played out a little bit differently, an entirely different Emma would have been dancing across the silver screen. The same goes for Gosling, who got the call to play jazz pianist Sebastian when writer-director Damien Chazelle decided to change his original acting lineup. Originally, La La Land would have starred Emma Watson and Miles Teller. Back in early 2015, Damien Chazelle said the only thing he knew for sure about La La Land was that it would be a musical and that Teller would play the male lead. The two had previously worked together on his critically acclaimed film Whiplash, so the reunion made sense. But a whole lot can happen when you're working on a movie, especially one you started writing back in 2010. Along the way, La La Land began to evolve, and Chazelle eventually decided that Teller wasn't right for the part at all. Unfortunately, the young actor didn't take the news very well, texting the director, "What the f***, bro?" Emma Watson reportedly handled things a lot better, and she was okay with passing on the part of Mia. After all, she was already committed to Disney's live-action reboot of Beauty and the Beast, and she explained to Entertainment Weekly, "I knew I had horse training, I knew I had dancing, I knew I had 3 months of singing ahead of me, and I knew I had to be in London to really do that, so scheduling conflict-wise, it just didn't work out." Of course, Watson's Beauty and the Beast went on to break the billion-dollar barrier, becoming one of the highest-grossing films ever made, and Stone would win an Oscar for a La La Land performance as Mia. So yeah, it looks like things worked out pretty well for both of the Emmas. As for Teller, well, he's probably still nursing a case of whiplash over the director's diss and dismissal. James McAvoy. When M. Night Shyamalan's Split hit theaters in 2017, audiences were terrified by James McAvoy's performance as Kevin, and Patricia, and Hedwig, and Dennis. Playing a man with 23 personalities and a 24th on the way, McAvoy stole the show every time he morphed into a new persona. But as it turns out, Joaquin Phoenix, who had worked with the director on Signs, was actually Shyamalan's first choice to play Kevin, and each of his individual identities. However, Phoenix ended up being tied to another movie and had to drop out. Making things even more complicated, Shyamalan's second choice, McAvoy, was also committed to another film, Fortunately for everyone involved with Split, the Scottish actor's schedule soon cleared up, and he was able to sign on. But stepping into the film so suddenly posed a bit of a challenge for McAvoy, since he had to play 9 different characters. As a result of the casting confusion, he only had about a quarter of the time that he usually took to prepare for just one character, let alone 9. Still, McAvoy was able to pull the roles off perfectly, scaring audiences and critics alike. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.